Today, we have an episode that's going to talk about more predictions of the housing market. There's some news that came out today where many experts are predicting an increase in single family home prices. And even some of these people are putting their money where their mouth is. Even builders are expecting higher home sales. Then we're going to talk about an insurance crisis where there's some little known data that is showing insurance claims skyrocketing, litigation, lawsuits, and what that's going to do for insurance premiums and rates that people have to pay. Then we're going to talk about electric vehicles. EVs have some announcements with regard to battery range. We'll give you a hint, almost 1,000-mile battery range. And there's some service and maintenance issues that are not being addressed by dealerships and repair shops that might completely change the way that these electric vehicles are serviced. And last, there is a vehicle being imported to the US, give you a hint, costs only a few $1,000s, that people are clamoring for. They're not able to sell as many as they can because they can't get them fast enough. But some of the buyers are getting fooled because you may not actually be able to use them legally. So those are our topics for today. So first, let's jump right in with this real estate thing, right? In real estate, look, there are opinions that go both ways on what's going to happen to the real estate market. And the important thing is not to look at opinions. Everybody can have an opinion, and opinions can go either way. But what's probably more important is to look at the data, look at the actual facts behind the opinions, and then you can form your own opinion, but do it based on facts. So here's NBC financial page. The idea of a starter home has become more of a fairy tale, and buyers are finding creative opportunities. Here's somebody with a tiny home that they purchased and put on some piece of property. But here's the thing. Co-buyers with different last names increased 31% since 2019. What does that mean? Co-buyers with different last names. That means probably a parent or a non-spouse is the co-buyer on a mortgage. That's because many times people can't afford a mortgage on their own. Why is that? Well, we talked about it in prior videos. If you had the average priced home, which was just over $200,000, at a 3% mortgage, which is what the rates were in 2018. That was the model for comparison. $220,000 house, 2.9% mortgage. Your payment's just over $1,000, $1,100 mortgage payment. Fast forward to 2023. Now your average price home is $460,000 at a 7.5% mortgage. Now your payment's $3,500. It's almost triple. So people are having to get creative on how they're finding a house. Prices have surged, mortgage rates have surged, and now, in order to earn enough money to afford the monthly payment, you have to earn more than $100,000 to afford the monthly payment. And a starter home, modestly priced 2-bedroom home, has become exceedingly rare. They're not building them anymore. And all the ones that were built are currently owned, and nobody wants to sell them. It's become increasingly challenges for first-time buyers to find an affordable entry-level property. Here's the thing, though. You can get creative. And you've seen our website, homescheap.com. We feature every week houses that are available across the country that are $200,000 and less. And we're going to raise that up a little bit. We're going to expand a little bit to probably $250,000 or $260,000, maybe $270,000, because 200, most people can stretch a little bit more than that. So we're probably going to increase the threshold for houses that we locate to up to $260,000 or $270,000. Regardless, if you're a home buyer and you want to buy a house but just don't feel like you can afford it, we've mentioned this before, buy the cheapest house you can stand. At least buy something. At $260,000, $270,000, there's plenty of houses out there. Now, may not have granite countertop, may not have swimming pool, may not be beachfront, but there are houses you can find on several acres, under 260. There's houses you can find with more than 3 or 4,000 square feet. There's houses you can find that are near a big city, that are near the coast, within 15, 20 minutes of the ocean, in the mountains. You may not be able to find all of those things in one house, but they're out there. So what's better? Finding a house that's not a dream house, or buying a home with friends, right? That's the option they're talking about in this article. Grouping people together and buying a house as a group of people. Is that really what you want? You might as well live in an apartment. You're kind of roommates. It's kind of like going back to college dorm days. Think about the trouble that occurs in a relationship: spats, anxiety, animosity. And I'm talking about a romantic relationship, husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. You guys have enough problems in that kind of relationship. Everybody does. What happens if we throw 4 people, 6 people in a group that aren't even married or not even in that kind of relationship? It's going to get ugly quick. But that's what people are doing to split the cost of buying a house, right? And it's a way to do it. It could be a problem, but here's an example. A few weeks, the roommates found a 2-story detached brick home on 1.25 acres for $315. That's not bad, right? The houses are out there. It's pretty cheap. They still had to pool 3 people together to get the mortgage. Is that an idea of being a homeowner? Here's the house right here. Not bad. Nice little house. With 3 incomes, it broadens the possibility. Is it better to throw in with 3 people, or maybe downsize to 260 and just buy it with you and your partner? Another fact: the housing market is so tight that home prices are 44% higher than before the pandemic. But here's the thing. Is that a huge increase? Well, the pandemic started in 2019. So I don't know when they're going back. They're going back to January of 2020, right? Right now, we're in 2023, more than 3 years later. And this is a little bit of a misnomer, because if you go back to October, September of 19, the prices were the same. But for the sake of argument, let's say it was 3 years and it went up 44% in 3 years. Well, if you take 44 divided by 3, how much is that? That's maybe 15% per year. If you just take 44 divided by 3, that's 15. Well, that's not actually true, because with compounded interest, it's probably really only about 10 or 11% per year. Now, granted, that's an increase per year, but 44% is a little bit of an exaggeration, because if you divide it up per year, 10 or 11% increase in real estate, sure, it is higher than the average, but there have been many times that real estate has gone up more than that in a year. It doesn't change the fact that homes are still in the fours, right? It says median home is 419. Different measurements of that, different calculations have put the median price at 419, 440, 460. Sometimes people guess the average versus the median. But this is the big deal. There are 39% fewer total homes compared to that. That's the real story. It's not so much the price, it's that there are fewer homes. If you're a home buyer, there's hardly any houses out there. The U.S. housing market needs 3.8 million units of housing more in order to have enough houses to go around. We've talked about it before. It may be closer to 4 or 5 million. And builders need to build faster. Well, is that what's happening? Guess what? Home builders love high rates. Well, it's not really they like the high rates, but the low supply of homes is giving builders ample supply to step up constructions despite high rates. So they don't really love the high rates. They're building in spite of that. So builders who are on the cutting edge of the market, they have to put their money where their mouth is. Look, here's a picture of somebody building a house. If you build a house, average modest house that sells for 400,000 or 500,000, you're putting 200,000 of cash, at least, maybe 250, at risk. You're buying all that lumber. See all this lumber, the framing, the facing, the sheetrock, all the electrical, the foundation, pouring concrete. That's all cash out of your pocket, plus the labor. Here's a construction worker, probably a framer. You're paying that person. You're buying the land. You're renting equipment. You're amortizing all your capital improvements. That's all cash out of your pocket. If you are a builder and you don't believe that there's going to be a housing market to buy volume of homes, you're not going to put that money out there. Well, guess what? Builders are stepping up because they know that this is true. What they know is there's 3.8 million houses short in the marketplace, and they know people are buying them in spite of the high rates. Maybe not at the same volume, but they're buying them. They're getting used to that new normal of price and interest rate. So here are builders that are diving in with both feet, building homes. High interest rates, usually bad news for builders, but now they're actually making new homes easier to sell by compounding a shortage of real estate. How do interest rates make a shortage of interest rate? Well, here's why. Resale homes, used houses instead of new houses, in order to get sold, have to have a willing seller. A willing seller. Every person who has a resale home, who's living in a home right now, is paying a low interest rate. They either bought it and their interest rate is 2 or 3% that they got when they purchased it in 15, 16, or 17, or they bought it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they had a higher rate, but then they refinanced. Nobody really got past 2018 or 19 and didn't refinance their mortgage. Nobody did that. Very few people left their rate at high percentages, right? If you had a 7% or 8% mortgage and it was 2019, you're going to get postcards in the mail every day from people saying refinance at 3%. It's a no-brainer. You're going to do it. Unless you only had a year or two left on your mortgage, you're going to go ahead and refinance, or unless you owned it cash. So everybody has a low rate. How does that affect the inventory? Well, if you have a low rate, you're not going to sell your house because you also have to throw away your interest rate. So there's a shortage of supply. The housing shortage was a problem even before COVID, because in 2008, when the financial crisis hit, builders shut down. They didn't want to build anything. Many of them went bankrupt. And the ones that didn't have the capacity to build more, or there were no buyers. The 2008 financial crisis really didn't get over with until the beginning of 2010. So from 2010 to maybe 12 or 13, builders were hesitant. The construction industry really didn't start ramping back up until 13 or 14. That's only 5 years of building before the pandemic hit. So there was only 5 years of catch up. A lot of that catch up only caught up to what was stopped building in 2008, 9, and 10, and 11. So it's almost like a break even. Now you have this influx of buyers after the pandemic, and you have that shortage of homes. The flurry of home buying during the pandemic took a lot of supply off the market. Ultra low rates are gone. Anybody who bought or refinanced a mortgage would need to pay substantially more interest if they decided to move. So there's a supply problem. Builders are stepping in. They know, because they do all the research, that the buyers are out there. So this is a place where builders, even large-scale developers, are recognizing that need in the marketplace. And now that a year or so has gone by with these higher rates, or close to a year, they're seeing people are still buying houses. They're buying in spite of the interest rates. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about an insurance crisis where there's some litigation happening and some large-scale claims that may affect everybody's rates in the coming years, because it takes a while for these losses to be baked into insurance rates. Many insurance commissioners in different states don't let you raise rates until you've already paid out the claims. And there's some big time claims coming up, and we'll take a look at that here in a minute.
Are you tired of automated systems and chatbots when you need assistance? Experience actualhuman.com and connect with real professionals, not automation. At actualhuman.com, we bring you a network of professionals who are excited to answer your questions and provide guidance. Getting started is easy. Let us show you how. Here's how it works. Step 1. Select the best date and time for your video call. Step 2. Describe your situation and the areas you're looking for advice. Step 3. Connect one-on-one with an expert and get the undivided attention that you deserve. Experience the difference. Visit actualhuman.com today and schedule your professional consultation. Actualhuman.com. Expert guidance from real people.
So here you go. Insurance litigation increased 30% in 1 year. You know, we looked at the chart for real estate and it went up 44% in 3 years. How about 30% in 1 year? Business liability, hurricane, and home insurance cases were the major drivers. So you may think, well, I didn't put in a claim. I don't really care. I'm not the insurance company. Too bad. They got to pay it out. Well, here's what a lot of people don't understand. Whatever insurance companies have to pay, you have to pay. Because if they pay out claims, they have to figure that in to the premiums to charge for the coming years. How do they figure how much your insurance rate is going to be? So if you buy homeowners insurance and you pay $2,000 a year, they didn't come up with that number by spinning Wheel of Fortune and saying it's $2,000. What they did was they calculated based on the size of your house, your zip code, all the other factors that went into it, how much they actually had to pay out in claims for a house like that in that area with all the different factors. And they use that to come up with a rate for underwriting. It's called actuarial. Well, if the litigation, meaning the payouts went up 30%, what that is going to do to future premiums is easy to see. It's also going to go up, right? Districts of most claims filed, most active. Well, this is actually has to do with the litigation part, but most active defendants, State Farm, huge jump, Allstate, vehicle and property. So this is real estate. It is mostly personal lines. Case resolution, most of them were settled, and the appellant won, right? So in this case, most times the person who's suing won. Findings in cases terminated, duty to defend, median time, 268 days. So it's taking almost a year to get these cases through trial. Approved class action settlement, $530 million. These are what insurance companies have to deal with. Now, you may not like insurance companies. You may not care about them. You may think, too bad, you got to pay out your claims. That's fine. And if you're the recipient of a claim and you're an insured, you want to get your claim paid. But if you're just a general observer, the more insurance companies have to pay out, the more that premiums are going to go up. It doesn't matter. The insurance company doesn't care how much they pay out in claims because it all comes back in premiums, right? They're just a middleman. All they do is they take the risk and the losses that people occur and they split them up over all the other policyholders, people who didn't pay or didn't have claims, right? So they, of course, make a profit. They have administrative costs and rent and all their employees. And you might think that that's excessive. That's fine. They're going to make the same amount no matter how much claims come in because they're just going to take their 10% profit on top or whatever it is, and they're going to take all the claims and divide it up, and that's going to be your premium amount. The only people that really benefit from it are actually insurance agents. Insurance agents actually make more money when rates go up because the insurance agent, local Allstate agent, Joe Schmo, whoever it is that you pay or you sign up with for insurance, they get paid a commission. And that commission is a percentage of the premium. It's usually about 10%. So if you pay, let's say, $2,000 a year for your car insurance, let's say, the agent, your local Allstate, State Farm, whoever agent, they get paid a commission for handling that for you. The insurance company pays them that. You don't have to pay them. And it's about 10%. So they make a couple $100. They're not getting rich off it, but they make a couple $100. So as rates go up, the agent says, look, for the same policy, last year was $1,450. This year is $2,100. Instead of making $145, now I'm making $210. Okay. And if all their policies go up, insurance agents are going to make more money. So litigation is one way that claims go up. And look, whether you agree with it or not, that's how insurance works. It takes the claims that a few people have and divides it up over many. So that's why insurance companies want to help reduce claims, not by denying legitimate claims, but by helping people have lower risk, helping people have lower damages that happen to them. And that's why in the contracts, it's written what is covered and what's not. If they pay money for something that's not covered, that throws their numbers off, because when they figured your insurance premium, they figured it on exactly what types of losses and damages they're going to cover and what types they're not going to cover. And if they all of a sudden start paying for things that they didn't calculate in their policy, then the premiums they're charging don't make sense anymore and doesn't add up. So you might say, well, it's not fair. They didn't pay for the radio that got stolen out of my car, something like that. Well, if your policy says we don't cover radio stolen from cars, then there's a reason for it, because if they did have to cover radio stolen from cars, your premium would have been higher and everybody's premium would have been higher. So there's a reason, a calculation they come up with. Again, whether you think they make too much money or maybe they're inflated incomes, whole nother story. But you want to have losses be low, and you want to let the insurance companies help you create a lower risk profile. The next subject we're going to talk about is actually a very good one. It has to do with EVs, and there's something happening with electric vehicles with batteries and repairs that everybody's going to want to know about. So here you go. A new battery is being introduced that can travel over 750 miles on a single charge, fundamentally reinvent the battery. And this is a solid state battery. It's introduced by a company called One. It's called the First Gemini. And it was able to power a Tesla Model S for 752 miles across Michigan on a single charge. Third party validated this. This development is something which is going to change EVs. Right now, electric vehicles have the obstacle of selling to buyers that are afraid of getting stuck with a dead battery and they can't charge it. Cars that rely on electricity offer benefits. They're quieter, faster, but it's been difficult to drive long distances because the batteries can only hold a limited charge, and charging stations are difficult to find on the road. This is stopping potential users from making the switch to electric. As we know, electric vehicles, if you really drive one, drive pretty good. Now, you may have reasons to want a gas vehicle. There's a lot of them. We've talked about some of the downsides to EVs before. We're going to talk about another one here in a minute, and how repairs are limited on electric vehicles. But the range hasn't been increasing, but it's increasing little by little. 150, 200, 250, 300, 320. It's gradually creeping up. If this battery is introduced with 750 miles, there's another one Toyota's working on that could be 900 miles. That's a game changer. Well, now if you're going to go on a day-long trip, you don't have to stop during the trip. Most of the time, if you're on a long-distance trip, you're going to stop overnight anyways. And in fact, if you have do the math, if you have a 750 mile range and you drive 75 miles an hour all day, well, it's really simple. 750 divided by 75, that's 10 hours. Most people don't drive more than 10 hours. And if you do drive more than 10 hours, you're going to take a break for an hour or two anyways. Get something to eat, relax, have dinner and whatnot. Well, now you can recharge. You're not going to charge it back up to 750, but you might be able to get an extra 100 or 200 miles, or maybe 300 miles out of an hour and a half or 2 hour charge on your trip. So once you start seeing battery ranges at 800 miles, then long distance trips are going to be the same as with gasoline. Because the problem now is if you have a 200 mile range and you want to take a 3,000 mile road trip, you have to stop 3 times a day for a couple hours. It's not going to be worth it. You're going to spend more time parking than you are driving. A 750 or 800-mile range, game changer, because the math now works on long trips. And sure, not everybody takes long trips, and even those that do don't do it every day. But you don't want to have the car that you own limit how you can get around, how you can transport. More advanced batteries. The range of EVs has increased dramatically, making it easier to choose an electric vehicle. Besides more efficient, talks about environmental. And look, we all have different opinions about conspiracy theories that people are, trying to get you to switch to EVs so you can't drive around as much. But the bottom line is that it's going to happen. There's another article that we'll post next couple of days where they're building a $6 billion battery plant. Ford's building it in Texas. If they're investing that kind of money, they're all in. They're not going to spend that kind of money and not switch to EVs. But what about maintenance? Here's a really good article about maintaining electric vehicles that, really could be an overlooked factor. This is PPEs, personal protective equipment for EV and hybrid maintenance. You can't just be a mechanic and open up a hood and start wrenching underneath the hood of an EV, because you're talking thousands of volts, right? And this company has different pieces of equipment, gloves, protective equipment. You have to almost be like an electrician, high voltage electrician. Hazards, shock. The greatest hazard in working with an EV is electric shock or burns, even in hybrid vehicles with less than 50 volts. Typical EVs are often 48 to 120 volts. Voltage can penetrate human skin. You have to have voltage rated gloves. You also can have arc flash. So if you're working on something and two contacts get close together or accidentally touch, we've all had the case where we try to jumpstart a car with jumper cables, and one cable accidentally hits something, you have a little spark, a little flash. Well, imagine that with many more watts, amps, and volts. That's really what the determining factor of electrical hazards is the amps, not as much of the volts. Well, if you get an arc flash, it's a hazard because that can blind you. It can throw off debris that can go in your eyes. It can also be hot. To protect each employee from shocks, burns, and injuries, where electric arcing or heating can occur, right? Arc flash burn hazards and also fire hazards if it catches on something that is combustible. Now, in theory, if you have an EV, you're not going to have gasoline, but if you're working in the same shop where there are gas vehicles, you could have the ignition source. Here's a picture of a mechanic working on EVs. This does not look like a typical mechanic at Joe's garage, does it? This person has on gloves, face shield, mouth shield, PPE shirt. This could meet the hazard of most hybrid vehicles. Additional flash suit may be needed for some batteries. Proper PPE, maybe like firefighters turnout gear. Think about that. You're working on cars, instead of just wearing overalls and maybe a pair of safety glasses, you have to wear firefighter turnout gear, because in fact, many of the hazards that exist with working on EV are very similar to a firefighter working on putting out a fire. Workers must be trained and designated. This is why, because if you have a staff of employees in a repair shop working on different vehicles for a long time, there are going to be electric vehicles and gas vehicles in the same shop, in the same service department, repair garage. You can see in the background of this picture, there's a bunch of cars up on lifts. Imagine you look at that service department, that dealership, that repair shop. There's 10 bays on each side and cars are lined up. Some are gas, some are electric, because gas cars are not going away overnight. Even if in 2030, half the cars that are sold are EVs, there's still going to be millions, tens of millions of gasoline cars still on the road. So you're going to have people working on both kind of cars. How do you account for that? You don't want to pull in a car in a shop and hand it to Joe Schmo who's not trained and designated to work on EVs. You might have to have different color uniforms to designate right? So that way a service writer or dispatcher doesn't accidentally give an EV to a non-trained employee or one that doesn't have the right equipment. That's a new thing that dealerships are now starting to have to take into account. Practice often uses petrochemical industry. One of the things that happens in the first responder industry, firefighters, is they have to have regular training for PPE, for fitment, making sure it's properly dated. You know, firefighter gear goes out of date after a certain period of time, even if it's not used. If it's exposed to a fire, it goes out of date sooner, not qualified anymore. These types of OSHA requirements may filter into auto repairs as well. Chemical exposures, there's a whole lot of different chemicals inside electric vehicles, inside those batteries. There's acids and bases that are inside EVs. What about mechanical? One of the things that is different from an electric vehicle is it's very heavy. There are actually even reports where some parking garages are not going to be able to make it because the parking garage engineering was designed to hold an average vehicle weight of, let's say, 4,000 pounds, 3,500 pounds. Now, some are heavier, some are lighter, but the average weight of vehicles is 3,000 or 4,000 pounds. Well, now that you have EVs that weigh 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 pounds, you fill up a garage with those, and it could exceed the mechanical limits of the engineering of that garage. This can also happen in repair shops if you have lifts that don't account for that, or jacks, or even tow trucks that can't account for that. What about moving parts? The one thing about electric vehicles that's different from a gas vehicle when you're working on it, a gasoline vehicle, when it's running, you know it's running. It's making noise, there's belts, there's exhaust. The motor's running. So you know it's a hazard not to stick your hand in it. An electric vehicle, it's only turning when you press on the gas. So you could walk up to one, put your hand near where moving parts are, and not know that that vehicle is energized. And maybe somebody pushes a button, maybe something gets activated. Maybe some of these electric vehicles actually have an automatic system to where when the battery gets too cold, it kicks on the engine to heat up the battery. Sometimes it needs to turn the compressor for the air conditioner. And that's something which could activate while you're working on the underneath of a car. And another part is there's a lot more metallic inside EVs, and the shape and structure of these vehicles is different. So repairing electric vehicles is going to be a new paradigm. Now, obviously, this is sponsored by Cintas, which is a company that makes this equipment, of course, right? But it doesn't mean it's not true. And then there's a lot of training that it's going to have to happen for these electric vehicles. Service managers need to be on the leading edge for EV maintenance, and you're going to have to do training even to get insurance. So this is something that you don't hear a lot about, but in reality, it is a reality of what's going on with electric vehicle maintenance. Last one is some very interesting vehicles that are coming into the US. People are buying them up like hotcakes. They cost a few grand, and they're coming from out of the country, and people love them, but there may be a hidden risk in owning these vehicles. Back in a second. All right, here we go. So there's these Japanese mini trucks that are out there, cost as little as 3,000. You may have seen them, right? And depending on what part of the country you're in, you may have seen these little trucks. Looks like this, right? Imported from Japan. And there's some dealerships that sell them. There's some people that specialize in these types of trucks. People love them. They can cost $3,000 to $5,000 to $7,000. The problem is you have to be very careful. And the article says this: buyer beware. Why is that? Well, there's a loophole in the import rules for the United States. The import rules of the United States say that in order to import a vehicle, it has to meet certain criteria and emissions and safety and everything else. But if the vehicle is more than 25 years old, there's some exemptions for importation. However, it means it's okay to import it, but it doesn't automatically make it legal to register in your state or title in your state. There's two different layers of vehicle qualifications. One is importing into the country, bringing it through customs, CBP, taking it off the boat and having it be declared imported. And everything has import restrictions. You import bananas and you have to go through customs. You import computer chips, you have to go through customs. But once it gets through customs, at that point, it's pretty much free to travel around the US and go wherever it needs to go for the most part. Some states have some requirements, but for the most part, it's imported, it's a done deal. There's a difference with automobiles. Automobiles can be imported, but before you can start using it and driving it, you have to title it and register it in your state. Title and registration is done at the state level, not at the federal level. There's no US license plate. It's a state license plate. That's why every license plate you see has a name of the state. That's why there's the license plate game. You've all played it as a kid. You have, driving down the road, you say, hey, I saw Arkansas, I saw Michigan, and who wins, right? That's because every state licenses and titles vehicles separately. Wherever you're a resident, that's where you title it. Now, here's the thing. You can't pick whatever state you want to register your vehicle. You have to do it where you are a resident. How does that affect these trucks? Well, these trucks are technically not designed to be on U.S. roads. They're too small. They're too narrow. They're too short. They don't have the right bumper height. They don't have emissions. They don't have airbags. They don't have anti-lock brakes. They don't have a lot of the equipment that's required to be a safe vehicle on the road. And this one says 7,200, but there's a lot of sellers that offer them at cheaper than that, right? Here's the thing. A lot of people buy them because they're legal to import. Let me see if I can find another picture. And there's dealerships that sell them. There's a dealership in Texas that has hundreds of them sitting on their lot, right? And they offer them for sale, legally imported, have paperwork, have a bill of sale. The person buys it, they bring it to their state, they go to DMV and said, hey, I want to register it. The state says, no way. This thing's not legal. Well, it's legal to import. Yeah, import doesn't mean anything. That just means it's physically here, but you can't drive it on the street. So what you have to do, because it says right here, there are restrictions taken into account before buying one. A lot of them are just doing cheap compact vehicle to make it for a farm truck, right? And particularly popular among farmers. You can use it like a tractor. Some states allow you to use it like an ATV. Some states only allow you to register it if you put a governor on the engine so it doesn't go any faster than 25 miles an hour. You can't go on any road where the speed limit would be too fast for you to drive 25 and not impede traffic. You can't take it on the highway, main roads. So this is a little bit of a tricky thing because people love them. There's also a van that you've probably seen, these little minivans. They don't conform to U.S. standards. And you might say, well, how does it get imported? The standards for importation, the standards for registration are two different things. And you might say, well, I'll just go to one of the states that allows them. Here's the problem. The state laws of registration are based on federal laws. The federal government says, look, we give you highway money, we give you road money. If you want to keep that money, you have to make sure you're conforming to all of the federal highway rules about safe vehicles on the road. If you don't, we won't give you the money. There used to be no restrictions. Every state allowed you to register them. And then a few states said, wait a minute, we don't want these vehicles on the road. And they found out that just because they were allowed to be imported didn't automatically mean that they had to register them. In fact, the first state, I believe, was the state of Maine. Maine said, no, we don't want these cars on the road. Get these cars out of here. And they stopped registering them. In fact, they sent out a letter to all of the current owners of these mini trucks and said, your registration, void. Your title, canceled. Park it. Put it on the farm. Do whatever you want to do, but you can't drive it. And a couple other states saw this, and they piled on the bandwagon. Other states stopped registering new ones. Right now, there's, I think, 3 or 4 states that allow them. But even those states are working on changing their laws to take them off the road. The reason that a few states still allow you to do it is because their statute says that they're kind of allowed, but they're changing that quickly. They thought that they had to have that in their state law because the import regulations allowed them to be imported. And they said, we have to abide by this, but they don't have to abide by anything. Importation is different than driving. So if you see one of these vehicles on the road, chalk it up to historical memory, because you may not see them on the road after a couple years. In our car titles division, we get a couple dozen calls on a regular basis from people that want to title them. And the problem is they've already run into difficulty with their DMV of getting a valid registration, a valid title, and they're stuck. So before you put any money into one, even though it's $3,000 or $4,000, it's still big money. And if you can't do anything with it, it's throwing away money, unless you just want to drive it on your farm. But then you might as well get an ATV because it's a little more practical. The government basically doesn't want them on the road. There are a few little loopholes and angles you can use to get one, maybe titled or registered in a certain state. But if you try to drive it out of state, it's not going to work. And eventually, even those states are going to revoke the titles and registrations that have already been issued. It's an interesting vehicle. It ran its course. It was a novelty for probably 5 or 6 years. There was some on the road in different places, but it appears that it's coming to an end. You know, there's a annual conference every year for commissioners of Department of Motor Vehicle staff, and their official position is we don't want these vehicles on the road. And if they don't want them on the road, they'll find a way to change all their rules. It's already happened in, 30 some odd states, 40 states, and it's just a matter of time till the rest of them follow suit. Thanks again for all the questions. Keep us up to date on what you want to see on the channel. We do read the comments. We do read the emails and your voicemails, and anything we can do to put answers to the questions you want is much appreciated.
Are you tired of automated systems and chatbots when you need assistance? Experience actualhuman.com and connect with real professionals, not automation. At actualhuman.com, we bring you a network of professionals who are excited to answer your questions and provide guidance. Getting started is easy. Let us show you how. Here's how it works. Step 1. Select the best date and time for your video call. Step 2. Describe your situation and the areas you're looking for advice. Step 3. Connect one-on-one with an expert and get the undivided attention that you deserve. Experience the difference. Visit actualhuman.com today and schedule your professional consultation.